when you never won.
Between spending the last 4 years graduating school again and birthing a child while writing new music, I was convinced that Sharon Van Etten was a trooper, even superhuman, but in actuality she's just as human as the rest of us. That sounds like a cliche Pitchforkian platitude to step into the review with, but of all folk rock inspired singer-songwriters of the 2010s, Sharon Van Etten has always been the one that I could truly feel a connection to, no matter how personal her own writing was. Maybe this time it's because Remind Me Tomorrow sounds like a very grounded coming-to-age record, the kind that is nostalgic in the very blissful and fond way, which is an interesting contrast to the way that Deerhunter's new album explores nostalgia, but we'll get to that later on. I've written a whole script for it, and it'll be a right banger, won't it? Considering all the singer-songwriters that I'm not always that invested in, Sharon Van Etten's new album sounds an awful lot like them, and yet I think her music has this tangible, urgent, and fire to the way that she holds onto notes like trembling fingers grasping stony ledges, like it's the last thing that'll save you from falling into the unknown. For something as laughable nowadays as naming an album epic, that album is one that somehow manages to truly feel that way, earning its epic status in a very humbling and diligent manner, in spite of not having symphonies, choirs, or distorted guitar solos. Take that, Nightwish. Perhaps it is just that Sharon Van Etten always sounds so convinced.
People say I'm a one-hit wonder, but what happens when I have to?
And on the subject of epic, the second half of this new album may as well have been called Epic too. That 5-track streak nearly gave me a heat stroke, and you wouldn't have guessed it necessarily from how easygoing and comfy the first half is. It's refreshing, as I'm usually accustomed to hearing the boldest and most stirring songs in the beginning, before the album fizzles out into a sprawling balladist ennui that feels rather disappointing a lot of the time. It's like a series of entrees at a dinner party that begin with mini beef wellingtons and end with white bread cucumber sandwiches. This album is a little bit like the reverse of that, except the white bread cucumber sandwiches that you start off with have seasoning. The slowest, most patient songs can reward with fountain passion, as I Told You Everything truly begins like a storybook ready to be opened with nothing except sparse piano chords, Sharon's voice and an ominous drone that seems to get closer before the drums snap into place and walk the track forward into its ready moments of nostalgic reminiscence. The beautiful piano returns for No One's Easy to Love in glistening arpeggios that instill wonder, like you're craning your neck around the room to gaze upon a museum of paintings representing everything in your adolescence. Sharon's newfound choices of instrumentation both support and betray her in moments all over this record, opting for drum machines and a synthesizer palette that actually sounds really good on the slow tracks near the beginning, but ends up stripping power away from the driving beats on the marching tempo tracks like Comeback Kid, and even the awkward track number 3, which seems to aim for a reverb-soaked atmospheric down-tempo meditation on always wanting to move forward into the uncertain future no matter what, but it instead sounds like yodeling practice inside a glowworm cave. It is the second half of the album where everything begins to feel truly on pace to becoming the triumphant yearbook reminiscence that it really wishes to be. The song 17 is an impassioned letter to New York that grows louder and fiercer with every step, containing the worry-free, wind-and-face liberation of a future island song. Sharon always sounds like she's on the verge of breaking into tears, and that emotive cannonball potential is so strong there, I almost end up not minding the dental water jet screech squealing at the end of the song. Yeah, it is those little compressed and messy production frailties that make listening to this album not perfect, but the heart is absolutely there, which is why the track You Shadow is probably my favourite one on here. It's all about realising that it's okay to stay yourself without changing who you are for anyone else. There's no snarky joke for me to follow that up with. This album has so much caring warmth, it left me with no other option than to just make me go, yeah, fair enough. So it only makes sense that the album concludes open-ended, dedicating the final track to her child in preparation for the rest of life and love to unfold further. And so while Remind Me Tomorrow has frailties in some aspects, it has the Sharon Van Etten quality of being earnest enough for me to care about every single lyric and melody and vocal performance around, because if it was ever going to be a mark of the time for her growth as a human being, then I really doubt that she would have ever half-assed that. And she didn't. I'll be giving this one a teary-eyed 6 out of 10. But can nostalgia be evaluated in a different way? No, not that Deerhunter. This Deerhunter. Deerhunter has been weird for me, mainly because I feel as if I should enjoy them more, but I can't enjoy them more, because I don't find them enjoyable more. Their discography of studio albums seems to run a little bit like this for me. Awful with a bad word, boring, boring, boring. Wow, what an album this is. This is literally everything I was hoping for when I first heard this band. It's like swimming through a lucid dream, just barely ledging on the barrier of consciousness, and everything that matters is swirling in a giant cloud. Annoying, better, I don't even think it's that this style is inherently bad or anything, I think that I'm just being an annoying tape scrap. In fact, there's a lot of dreary, slow unloading shoegaze that I like, and Deerhunter have been partial to dropping some lavish and warm and even ethereal music to be found on the lush fading frontier and the ayahuasca trip ready cryptograms, but maybe overall the approach to writing just isn't for me, because I often find myself just staring outside the window waiting Cloud 1 to pass behind Cloud 2, while Cloud 3 swivels back around the front. Meanwhile, Cloud 4 might position itself a little bit further off while Cloud 2 returns. Is this gag becoming a little bit long-winded and losing its charm the further it goes on? Because yes, that's exactly how I feel when listening to Microcastle. Anyways, I shouldn't talk too much shit about the band that introduced to widespread audiences the beauty of Bradford Cox's lexicon.
Unbelievable how good Bogart is.
But I also shouldn't talk too much shit because this is honestly my second favourite thing they've done. Nostalgia-wise, this hits the bittersweet spots of reminiscing on memories that are long gone, or beginning to fade away. At times it feels as if these songs were written based on a certain place that has long since changed drastically, and will never be able to be returned to in a way that will spark that same fond memory again.
I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to be here. So can you tell me, how did I get there?
You can't do that, I'm sorry.
In fact, a lot of this album is basically about things disappearing. Emotions, people, places, memories themselves. And while the instrumental palette is comfier and clearer than ever, dropping the shoegaze musk for a textbook indie Americana, none of it culminates in anything passive or half-hearted. The songs sound beautiful, melodies pop like worrying colours, and Cox's words begin to actually stutter through a distortion filter. I'd almost thought that Julian Casablancas hopped in for a go at the mic. It's not unsettling or even depressing to listen to, it's just kind of sorry. Each event that Cox describes, from the shock experience by learning about sudden murders like that of British MP Joe Cox, to watching scenes in the final James Dean film, feels like an eventual wear away at everything. I won't lie that if I didn't like this album I would have used that as an analogy to say, oh, it's wearing away at my liking for this band. But I won't do that because I do end up finding this album mysteriously engaging. It becomes mournfully emptier the further that you get into the album, and Nocturne feels like a truly poignant admittance that everything you love will eventually slip away from you, and that it's normal to not always know how to really deal with that. Maybe it dawns on others a little bit differently, but I honestly think that this is strong 7 out of 10 territory, and I'm hoping that won't fade away. Maybe Bradford Cox does know what he's talking about.
What else is there to do in life? This is basically it. We're done.